Assalamu alaikum and greetings to our viewers from around the world. My name is April King and I am your host for today's broadcast on Islamic Perspectives of Domestic Violence, brought to you by TYLP, Transitional Youth Leadership Program. If you're not familiar with TYLP, it's a nonprofit organization comprised of a global network of faith-inspired individuals who have a goal of empowering everyone to be change makers through purpose-driven courses, mentorship, and ventures. Before we bring on our guest, I want to let you know that you're an important part of today's conversation. Our guest will be answering questions at the end of the program. So if you have questions, put them in the comment section with the hashtag ask. If we're not able to get to your question today, don't worry, we'll send out responses after the broadcast. Our guest for today is a co-founder and former president of NISA, North American Islamic Shelter for the Abused. He has been advocating against domestic violence for over 20 years, and he shares a wealth of information and knowledge through his courses offered through TYLP. Please welcome Dr. Muhammad Rajab Ali.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us today.
It's my pleasure, April. It's my pleasure.
Dr. Rajab Ali, you have been an active member of the Muslim community in the San Francisco Bay Area for decades. What inspired you to get involved and start advocating against domestic violence?
Well, I'm glad you asked this question, and I think it's a good place to start our conversation and our discussion. As you know, I was very, very well involved in my community. I was involved at the masjids, at the school. I dealt with the youth group for many years. So I was deeply involved in my community, and I could feel, I could sense, because I talked to people, that there were something brewing at home. Things were not as harmonious, if we could use the word.
Mm-hmm.
But what amazed me was the silence. There was complete silence about it. Nobody would talk about it. And well, I did not agree with it, but I understood that this comes from what? The stigma that goes with it, the culture that goes with it, what goes in the bedroom stays in the bedroom.
Wow.
I just could not accept that. I said, we have to do something. If you are a leader of a community, that's what you do. You have to know when there is a problem, you start moving. And it was a heavy moving. It's not easy we went through a very difficult process to get the community to really accept and talk about it.
Yeah.
For example, when I was starting, I would go wherever there is a conference or whatever, and I would ask the organizers, give me a chance to speak about it. And absolutely not. There was a complete denial. This was something very negative, I would be told. Why would you do something negative? Respectfully, I said that, as an imam of a masjid told me, why are you bringing those problems here? We don't have this problem. See, we don't have this problem. That's very naive, very, very. But I got a break eventually in an event known as the Community Day. That was in the early 90s. I got a break for 5 minutes, believe it or not. 5 minutes to talk about domestic violence. But that was a break.
And so what was the rest of the community's response when you first started to get involved?
It's amazing and it's interesting because there was a total denial. People want to hear about it. And very funny about it, because there is the Muslim community on one side, and then there is the mainstream community on the other side. On both sides, we had opposition, on both sides, for different reasons. The Muslim community resented that project, that work, because, like I said, we were just creating a problem. It didn't exist. We can handle our problem, right? There is no problem. And it's remind me of the ostrich syndrome. What the ostrich does when there is a problem, digs his head into the sand and say, I'm safe, right? And that's what the community was doing. So they thought that we at NISA would bring the women against the men. They at it as purely as a gender issue. This is man versus woman or woman versus man. And there's no way me and my co-founder were given the name home breakers.
Wow.
We were told we are home breakers. So that was the Muslim response. It doesn't happen. We don't need you. It's not a problem. The
Yeah.
mainstream was very different.
Right.
The mainstream look at it from the way that, oh, you will come and talk to us about your Quran and just wash it off and just negates it and say it is not a problem. Be patient, be patient. Allah will take care of it. Right? They had a different approach altogether. They did not believe we will do it for what it is. And one day I was in a seminar in a city near my hometown called the city of San Jose in California. And the judge who was cheering, she was cheering that session. And when she introduced me, when she talked to me, you could see she was not very warm and very friendly. Because same thing, she thought I would just come and give Quranic justification and defend it. After she listened to my presentation, she came to me. She said, I'm so proud that in your community there are men who are taking this position, right? So it changed 180 degrees completely after she listened to me. But before listening to me, she assumed that I will just give a complete different justification
Right.
for domestic violence.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's a topic that's not only stigmatized in the mainstream populations, but yeah, in our communities as well. And so I think it's amazing and it's great that you've been involved in this work. You go over a lot of very detailed information in your course. What are some key statistics or data points that we should be aware of when we start talking about domestic violence?
The first thing we know about is statistics. Two things. First thing is the statistics that I gave you is here for the US, all right? And I want you to know that the statistics may vary from location to location. That is to be understood with local factors and everything like that, local legislation, local factors. But there is a certain common threads, commonalities between the statistics. So whatever I'm giving you the stats is from here. And the second thing is, from an Islamic perspective, statistics, you have to be very careful about it. For example, when you look at the disparity between men and women who are victims of domestic violence, right? You will see that around some statistics give up to 85, 90% of the abused are women. And roughly 10% of the abused and victims are men. So now you say there is a huge disparity. This is a gender problem.
Yeah.
From an Islamic perspective, it doesn't matter what the percentage is. It doesn't matter what the statistic is. In Islamic perspective, as an individual, I'm responsible for what I do, good or bad. I cannot, on the day of judgment, stand in front of Allah and say, oh, Allah, 90% of people did that. So that's not an excuse in the Islamic perspective, as we understand the ownership of action, the responsibility of action. We cannot accept that. So one stat, the second stat that is mind-blowing is, if in the United States of America, we say 80% of cases go unreported. That's very high. And I'm wondering if what would be that in a remote place, in a village, or in Southeast Asia, or in Asia, or in Africa, or in Middle East. I don't know. If in America 80% of cases go unreported, that's very high. And it tells you the stigma that comes with it. Okay, it tells you how people are not willing to talk about it. All right, that it is perhaps a very unpopular a topic of discussion for society in general. All right, and an astonishing 3 million children, 3 million children witness domestic violence. They grow with domestic violence in their home every year.
Yeah.
And what is more troubling to me is that 33% of children who witness, who live, who grew up with domestic violence, will they themselves be abusers in the future when they are
so
married?
terrible.
This is sad.
Yeah.
This is transferring this problem into the other generation. It's so sad. And that's why we have to do something about it. And there are many other stats. Again, for example, another one that I talk about that in my course so that people understand the nature of what you are getting involved in. It takes an abused a victim 7 times to go through the cycle of it before that person can say enough is enough, I leave my abuser. It takes 7 times. And those cycles we talk in the course of cycles maybe sometime 1 year interval. You're looking at 7 years. In 7 years, you could be having 3, 4 kids. I don't know.
Yeah.
It is a very complicating factor. So, and it's very frustrating. It's you are an advocate, you are a counselor, and you are working with somebody, and you are almost right there, and you see that person move back with the abuser to start the whole thing again.
Right.
I talk about that in my course so that you know what you are getting into. You are mentally prepared to receive those kind of opposition when you are doing the work.
Yeah, you definitely do go into quite a bit of detail on that in the course. It's really interesting. And I could see how it would really add a lot of frustrations for people who are advocates and want to see
You're correct.
progress being made, but victims remain with the abuser. Do you find these key data points or statistics, do they reflect the smaller communities that you've done work, the kind of subgroups that you've done work with?
You see, there was a time when people used to say, this is not our problem. This is this community or that community. Those are the people who do it. There was that. But recent studies and observations, and if you are in the field, you realize that domestic violence has crossed all barriers. Whether you are educated or not, whether you are rich or not, whether you are pious, religious or not, it has crossed all communities of ethnicities and cultures. It's everywhere. All right. So there are many reasons for that. I don't have time to go in there, but no, I would say it has crossed all barriers, and you see it in all communities.
Yeah.
They no longer say these people do that, we don't do that. No.
Right. Wow. Okay. Thank you for that. In your course module, you have a discussion about how Islam views domestic violence, and you actually reference a verse in the Quran, chapter 4, verse 34, that seems to legitimize the beating of wives. This particular verse is referenced quite a bit in the media, as well as even in our own communities. Can you elaborate on that verse and maybe how we should approach it?
Sure, absolutely, April. I think this is a big part of understanding domestic violence, especially if we are a Muslim community and we want to do something about it. You're right. This is in verse 434. 4 is the chapter of woman, Nisa, verse 34, and the words are there, Wadribuhunna. It's there. It's written there. You read it in Arabic. Wadribuhunna means you beat her. Right? So how do we reconcile that? Even you, April, I'm sure when the days you were studying Islam, you read that, you must have been shocked. How come? Why am I joining this religion now and condone the beating of wife? Right? You may have crossed yourself this question. All right. So it is very important that we have a complete understanding of that. And to help you understand and go through that verse, I'm going to approach it from 4 different angles. 4 different angles. First is the context of the verse. Number 2, the translation of the word. Number 3, this verse in the light of other verses of the Quran. Number 4, the life, the seerah of our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I think when we look at those 4 components of it, and we will see whether we have the right translation here or not, we have the right understanding of this verse or not, and it can help us. So let's start with context. When you talk about context, very important to understand the Quran is not a book. that was written like any other book. You have an introduction, you introduce the characters, then you build up the climax, and you have the anticlimax and the conclusion. Quran is not like that. Quran was a book that was revealed, that was given to Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, through the angel Gabriel, as the need arose in that very newly formed Islamic state, which was Medina. In this verse, this chapter was revealed in Medina. So you have to look at the context of it. When we talk about context, to explain to you what I mean by context, this verse is 434. If you go down 9 verses down, we will make it 443. You're following me? 443. Yeah. Then you have another such verse where the context is amazing. You need to understand the context, because in verse 443, April, we are told, don't drink when you pray. We are told, when you pray, make sure you are not drunk.
Right.
Why we don't do that now? Why we don't practice that now? Why now we are talking? We don't have a glass of wine, but I have a glass of water, excuse me. Why? Because we understand the context of that verse. The context of that verse was a major steps in the detoxification of this Medina community, because they were big drinkers. They were addicted to alcohol, and that came as a detoxification step. Once they were out of it, once the corrosion was concluded, you cannot use that verse. It's gone.
Right.
But it is in the Quran. And the same thing here. You look at the context of Medina. You look at the context of Arabia in those days. If a husband come home and see and caught his wife with indecency with a strange man, what would he do? What recourse does he have in this tribal society where his honor as a man is so crucial? How does he resolve that? How does he address that?
Yeah,
what would he do?
Back then they would kill people. I think, honestly.
Exactly, you hit it. They would kill that woman. If they can kill the man too, fine, they will, but the man most probably run away. But they would kill the wife. And we still have some societies who do that in the term that we use, honor killing. It is not Islamic, but unfortunately people still do it in the name of culture. So that's where the Quran says, don't kill her. If you catch your wife unfaithful, Islam, the Quran gave you some options. Option number one, you can forgive that wife if you have the heart for it. That depends. You don't have to, but if you have the heart for it, if you have a big heart, human beings are weak. She may have succumbed to some whatever. You can forgive her. Allah says, forgive her. You can forgive her. If you can't forgive her, divorce her. Divorce her. Let her go. But under no circumstances you can hurt her. You can beat her or hurt her. No. And I have even the great jurist Ibn Rushd. Ibn Rushd, may Allah bless him, when asked this question, that exactly he said. And and there is our contemporary Sheikh Alwani, may Allah bless his soul. I knew him personally, and he also is a great jurist of North America, and he also said the same thing. Right? You don't beat the wife, you don't mistreat the wife. And we have other verses of the Quran. We have 265 2 and 2 Surah Baqarah also talk about that, where where even after divorcing your wife, you do not mistreat them. Right. So Islam is not about mistreating the wife or beating the wife with a handkerchief or what. No. All right. So that's the context we need to understand of that. The second one is the translation. The word daraba has many meanings. One of them is beating, correct, but it also means to ignore. It also means to leave, get out of here, leave. It also means to explain, to cover. Now, if you use the word explain, it makes sense in that verse. Explain to the wife, what are you doing? That's immoral. What you're doing is something very serious. If you don't stop, if you don't correct, there will be divorce. If you talk about leaving and take a break, you are angry, you can't handle it, you leave. And you wait till you come down, and then you ask her to leave if you want. But you are not hitting. It makes more sense when you translate it, though. So we cannot just rely on the word literally beating and beating. We have to look more into it. Now, if you look at the context of the Quran itself, one of the ways of understanding the Quran is to study a verse of the Quran in the light of other verses of the Quran. And if you take this approach, you will see that beating a wife doesn't match with the maqasid, with the very essence, with the very goal of building a family. Right? It doesn't. Chapter 2, verse 231, chapter 65, 2, chapter 4, 1, chapter 30, verse 21, all those verses show nothing but that you must have harmony. Harmony with one another as spouse. You do not beat, you do not show violence. So you cannot say that, because it makes no sense when you put it in the big picture of what the Quran is talking between the dynamics and the relationship between husband and wife. You don't see beating at all, right? We found the context, we found the translation, we find the Quran. Let's go to the seerah of the Prophet.
Peace be upon him.
Please have any anecdote? Do we have any example that the Prophet, peace be upon him, his wife? No. Even his enemies, his biographers who don't like him, they never said, they never mentioned. And Aisha anha, our mother, told us that the Prophet ﷺ was a living Quran. He walks the Quran, he talks the Quran, he acts out the Quran. But yet, he ﷺ chose not to implement this particular verse on his wife in his family. Even though at the time, respectfully to our mothers of believers, they gave him ﷺ a very hard time. They were women, they would all love their husband, they were jealous of each other, right? So they gave him very, very, very hard time. Even at the time when Aisha anha came back from that expedition in Surat al-Nur, we see that. Gossiping was going around in Manila. The Prophet never put a hand on her. So we have to understand that. This is the teacher of the Quran.
Right.
This is the first person that is given the Quran, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, to teach us. He's our mentor. لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. You will verily find in the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam the best of your mentor, the best of your character to follow. He doesn't choose that.
Yeah.
So why would somebody use that? Why would somebody apply that and you say, I'm applying the Quran? No. I'm sorry, you do not have an understanding of the Quran. Have a total comprehension of Islamic philosophy, family dynamics, and but again, we got one last point I want, and that goes to, again, my teacher, my friend, Sheikh Abdullah Idris, my mentor. And one time he told me, you know why is that in the Quran? I said, why? He said, we don't like it. It's true. I don't like it. You don't like it. The Sheikh don't like it. Right? We can say even the Prophet never practiced it. But why it is there? Why it is there? It is there for only one reason. And that from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That Allah wants to show to the world that this Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam will be like the people you said, فَوَيْلٌ لِلَّذِينَ يَكْتُبُونَ الْكِتَابَ بِأَيْدِيهِمْ ثُمَّ يَقُولُونَ هَذَا مِنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ. Woe to the people who wrote the book with their hand and they say it from Allah. In other words, woe to those people who change the word of Allah. They remove what they don't like and they add what they like. This Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam will not be. And that verse is a proof. We don't like it. We get a lot of opposition. We get a lot of criticism about it, but nobody touches it because the final revelation of Allah is the Hafiz. He's protecting his last book from corruption.
Yeah.
I hope this will help our listeners understand. And as April has said, the
Sure.
question they can still ask.
Yes, please do submit any questions that you have in the comments with the hashtag ask. Dr. Rajabali, thank you for going over that with those key details. That was really, I think, helpful and really important and great information. Let's take some questions from our viewers. We have a couple that are going in. So, where are your services for the shelter, NISA, for Muslims only?
All right. Does our shelter service the Muslim only? Very good question. While we created an Islamically based organization to deal with domestic violence, our principle, our philosophy is embedded deeply in the Quran and the Sunnah of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. That's our philosophy. That's our approach to it. And I can go into detail. What does that mean? I just tell you, one of that means a statistic, as I told earlier. As a Muslim, you can't rely on statistics to do something, all right? You have to rely on your own, what you do right, what you do wrong. This is just one example. Our services are not. Our services are open to all who call us to help them, irrespective of their faith, irrespective of their culture, irrespective of their race. We do not differentiate among that. We just, if they qualify, if they are a case of domestic abuse and they are on the streets, they have no place to go, we open our services to them. But of course, when they come in the house, when they come in us, with us, they will have to abide by the Islamic philosophy if they have chosen this philosophy. For example, they can't say, I want to cook pork. They can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
If this is a Muslim house, you want to cook
Sure.
pork. They can't say, I want to have some wine with my dinner. We don't do that. But
Right.
they're free. If they want to read the Bible, they are free to read the Bible. If they want to go to church, they are free to go to church. We don't interfere in all these things.
Sure.
Okay? Very good question. The philosophy is Islamic, the voice is Islamic, but the service is open to everybody. And we have a lot of non-Muslim patients who are very happy with our service. They like our homes. They talk about our cleanliness. They talk about the quality, good food, right? That we give them. They talk about the treatment that they receive at the house.
Great. That's great. Okay, our next question is what are some ways we can help the abuser in domestic violence?
All right. This is, again, you have to understand, if you will take the course, you will see there is a lesson on the profile of an abuser. Okay.
Mhm.
And that part, this question is will be answered fully, but I can just touch on it. You have to understand the mind of the abuser. And then only when you understand the mind of the abuser, you can offer. And that again is an Islamic principle, because the mainstream tend to think once you are an abuser for the rest of your life. That's the main current thing. An abuser, it remains an abuser for the rest of their life. There may be some truth in it, but we cannot accept that as an Islamic organization. As an Islamic organization, we believe in Tawbah. We believe in changing and repenting to Allah and changing our life. So counseling, spiritual counseling, anger management, there are many things you can do and to have that. And like I said, I deal with it in the course, and hopefully you join in and you will be able to get more information on that.
Mhm. You do talk about the reconciliation between, the Islamic approach of trying to keep families together and trying to work towards reconciliation and not just complete separation. So how have you done that, or how has the organization done that? Was it through counseling or what
That has
methods?
been that has been, April, for the viewers to know, a distinguishing feature of NISA. We have had tremendous success at NISA keeping families together. And that's my personal experience. Couples who are ready to depart, ready to go, engaging them by providing spiritual counseling to them. And today, when many of them, I know them very well. They're in my community and I know them, I see them. When I see them now with their kids, and that I'm talking about some 15, some 20 years ago. So those kids now are teenagers. Some are going to college. And when I see them, I say, SubhanAllah, this is a joy and the satisfaction that you get, that Allah put you there, not by ourselves, not by everything, no, but Allah's intervention. Allah allows you to do something and keep those families together. Sure, there are cases that have gone too far and you can't. But there are many, many families, I will tell you, through counseling, through spiritual counseling, and sometimes education, anger management, proper parenting skill, we have been able to keep many, many families together. And that is something, a credit that we give to the Islamic perspective. We do not nobody wins in a divorce. Right? So you don't want divorce, you don't want to break the family. Right? As much as we can, we try to, but that may not work in all cases.
Sure.
I've had a lot of success.
That's great. That's really encouraging to hear. Let's go to our next question. Why are many seemingly pious Muslim men mistreating their family members?
All right, that
who seem
question,
religious, yeah.
yes, very good question. Indeed, very, very relevant question. And that goes back again to what I've said for the previous question. If you take the course, you will learn about the profile of an abuser. And that chapter is a very important chapter. I deal with that in detail. Hopefully you join in and you will learn that. But basically what you have is, you need to understand that the abuser himself is a victim. Right? You have to understand that sometime, right? You understand he's a victim. Perhaps he knows, perhaps he doesn't know what he's doing. Perhaps he has no control on what he's doing. Right? And that's where you have this has nothing to do with religious. That's why we gave that beautiful analogy of a wolf and a lamb. If you tune in the course, you will understand that. It has a dual personality, a split personality. The person, that's why in the masjid you see them pious, you see them with a big beard, you see them with a cap, we see them praying 5 times, but when they get home, boom, 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 they fire like a cannon. Okay? So this is what we call that. Right? So you are not here, we are not here, I'm not here, you are not here to judge anybody's spiritual deeds. No, we are not do that. That Allah knows. But we are here to give help. Many of those abusers need help. They don't realize what they are doing. They don't know where to get help. Right? So that's what explains why you may see them in the masjid. You may see them praying next to you, and at home, wow, it's fire upon fire. Okay.
Wow.
Sad part of it. That is the sad part of it.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. We have another question. What is the difference between guilt and shame? Healthy and constructive ways to help abusers process guilt towards growth and redemption.
All right. So guilt is when I feel when I've done something wrong. Right? It is very subjective. It's on me. I feel guilty about something I have done. Shame doesn't necessarily come from me. It may come from others, outsiders that are making me. I feel ashamed because what others will think of me. Right? So it is very closely related. You can work it together, but there are 2 different approaches to this. Guilt is mainly what I do and what I don't do. Right? That the Quran had this conscience, reproaching conscience at the level of iman as we go, right? Of the nafs, all right? So you have this questioning nafs that makes you feel guilty for what you do. Shame is outside. People are outside, look at me, and that's where I get the shame, because that's what they think of me, not what I bet necessarily what I am doing. If you look at an abuse, the abuse is not doing anything wrong, right? He or she's receiving the blows, but the shame is not from her action or his action. The the shame is from what the outsiders are looking at that situation.
Right. Thank you. Okay. And let's take one more question. How can childhood trauma and or post-traumatic stress disorder lead some taking the role of abuser? So those who have had trauma become the abuser. And what's the role of empathy in helping one towards rehabilitation and recovery?
I think this needs to be identified at a very early process. And that's why, you see, I'm a spiritual counselor. I don't do the real counseling. I leave that for the qualified licensed people. But that's my recommendation. if after you have been able to reconcile the abuser with the abuse, your next step is to recommend that they get counseling, early counseling for the children, right?
Mhm.
There is a huge, huge hope for reconciliation, for amends, right? Where that abusive mother or abusive father will look at that child and say, I'm sorry, son, or I'm sorry, daughter, and we have done that, but now we are getting counseling, we don't want. And the child, we have seen in the stats that I gave you how 33% of children will carry that. Those are the 33% that perhaps they don't get the help. They grow
Yeah.
up, it stays locked in their brain till they marry and they react what they have seen their parent done. But if you a huge 60%, if you give them the good help, if you give them the good thing, and if there is an acknowledgement of the wrong that was doing to them or to the other parents, there is a big hope of reconciliation.
Mhm.
Assume that they are doomed for life, right? By giving them the good role model, by talking about gender issues, gender relationship, by talking about marriage counseling, all these can really help them in their turn. We need to peel off the brain like an onion, right? You peel off the layer. So we need to remove those traumatic
Yeah.
experiences that they have seen, that they have witnessed, that they have experienced, and infuse in their brain the healthy thoughts, the healthy ideas,
Mhm.
how we encourage families to do things together, how we encourage, and here in California, we can.
Yeah.
That's one of the best therapy. I say, go in the mountain, camps in the mountain, and April, we camp a lot, right? So go out there, go in the forest, camp, and it is an amazing therapy. It is an amazing
Sure.
treatment that you can do.
You just mentioned the marriage counseling or the premarital counseling, and I think you touch on this in your course series as well. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I personally, before I got married, did go through premarital counseling. I found it to be very helpful to learn more about your spouse or the spouse to be, and as well as just kind of getting, the types of questions that are asked or scenarios that are discussed that kind of help you kind of identify what the other person is thinking or how they might approach certain problems. Can you talk a little bit about that premarital counseling?
Unfortunately, premarital counseling is not that accepted, predominant, prevalent in the Muslim community.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, I've been calling for it for many, many years now. And personally, I do not do a nikah. I do not do a marriage ceremony if you don't have time to give me for the pre-counseling. I don't charge. I don't charge for doing a nikah. But I will ask you two things. I will ask you a premarital counseling, and I will ask that you marry in a court of law before I do your nikah. All right, this is very important to me, and I'm known for that. So the premarital counseling is very important because let me ask you that question. I don't know out there you are listening to me. Are you already married? If you are already married, I have a very, very honest, simple question to ask you. Did you or did you not listen to the khutbah of your nikah? Most likely not. Most likely not. All right. You don't listen. Who listened to the nikah of the khutbah? You have so many things on your mind. Who is coming? Who did not come? What gift he brought to you? What food will be served? The flowers are not good. The pictures are not good. My makeup is not good. You have 101 questions to answer. Many of those people who are married, is perhaps the first time they are sitting on a stage with so much lights on them and 600, 800 eyes on them.
Right.
It's the first time. So you don't listen to the khutbah. So come to me, come to an imam, sit down 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 1 month before you get married, understand what you're doing about it. Understand that the day you marry is perhaps one of the most important days of your life. Understand the verses of the Quran that will be read. Understand what should be your relationship towards one another or your obligations towards one another. Not only during the intimacy of the marriage, but also the finance. How are you going to conduct your finance?
Hmm.
What relation should you have with friends? What relation should you have with in laws?
Right.
Right? We live in a time, in a culture where in-laws are called outlaws. I said, no. I said, no. So all these are things that we bring, and there are sometimes even sexual issues. Sexuality is not understood.
Hmm.
Who will I go to mommy and daddy and say I have a sexual problem? Right? So you cannot assume all these things. We need to talk to them before. Otherwise, if we don't do it, boom. You see, after 2 months after marriage, 1 month after marriage, you see, boom, the divorce happened.
Hmm.
So, absolutely, we talk about a lot of factors in the premarital counseling. It's not a legal document. I always tell the people who come and I do their legal, marital counseling, premarital counseling, I'll always tell them, I say, hey, this is not a legal document. I say,
Hmm.
the daughter or son of Bill Gates, I'll tell you get a lawyer. Okay, I'm not a lawyer. This is not about your asset, your business. No, this is just about the spiritual, the social, the economic factors that you will encounter when you are married. Because that's a huge change. You are an individual, you are living alone, and all of a sudden somebody moving with you. And here you go, you start together. And one of the other aspects that I like what I do is I always ask the aspiring husband and wife to choose a couple, what I call the buddy couple, an old auntie or an old uncle that you respect, right? Not old, but I'm saying elder than you that have been married for a while and you know they are successful in their relationship, in their marriage. You identify them. And in case you need to talk, those are the people that you talk. So there are very practical
Yeah.
steps that we can talk about. And that is very important. You do it before, there is no pressure on you. You have the time to soak it, to understand it.
Great. That's great. So, well, we're going to just take one last question. What can imams or community leaders and institutions like masjids or mosques do to combat domestic violence? What can
They
religious
need,
centers do?
yeah, they need to take an active position. Okay, and again, in the course, I go in detail about that. But basically, when you say imam, respectfully, I say that respectfully. We have to have respect for our imam, and we should respect our imam. But you need to understand they are not trained. They are not trained to deal with that. Just like they are not trained to deal with addiction. Just like
Hmm.
they are not trained to deal with gambling. They're not trained, right? And so they just went to a school, to a madrasa. They became a Hafiz Quran. They studied the fiqh. They studied the Sunnah. They studied. Yes, they know those stuff, but outside that, they are not trained. Okay, so the first thing is to make training programs for imams. And I
Hmm.
mean, the organization masjid should do that. Where only imams, you don't mix them because the imams have a certain, you have to respect their sanctity. You have to respect where they are, so you don't mix them with the crowd. Come and learn about domestic violence. They may not feel comfortable to do that. I'm the imam and you tell me I don't know. I'm the imam. I'm supposed to know everything, to have the answer for everything. So my suggestion is bring them together among the imams. That's
Hmm.
what we have done. And then with mental illness, that's what we did. We brought the imams together. It was very hard to get them, but I personally bring them together and we talk about mental illness among the imams, so they don't feel that they are talking to lay people and people think they don't know.
Sure.
So these are the things that you can do and to train them, at least to make them.
Hmm.
They won't give khutbah. And then you have to give them what we do in the month of October, as you know, is the month of domestic violence. So we will give outlines for khutbahs. Again, you don't tell the imam you don't know how to give a khutbah. So we give them, we feed them. We feed them, said, please address those topics in your khutbah, and at least in the month of October, give a khutbah.
That's great.
Give four, depending on how many Fridays there are in that October, four or five. But I would give 4 or 5 khutbahs in different massages in the Bay Area during the month of October, just to bring awareness to the thing. All
Hmm.
right. So it's very important that we train our imam, not only with domestic violence, but with any kind of contemporary issues that they are not trained. They didn't get the skill to do it, and they are not trained to do it. This is very different when you look at the Catholic Church, the diocese that has so much money, so much resources to do that. They send their preachers to special universities and things to be trained in those things.
Hmm.
I remember when ISNA sent me to for addiction, I was sitting with so many priests, right? So many, most of the attendees in that conventions and that thing and we met for a long time being trained. Most of them were priests. IC is there. Their thing is sponsoring them, giving them the training to do that because they did not have the training. So likewise, I can say the Imam did not get those training on contemporary issues, right? So, but now if you give them that with the spiritual knowledge and the contemporary issues and modalities of treatment, they can really be powerful instruments to educate.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I truly hope we can continue teaching and our religious leaders and community leaders in that. That was a lot of really great information. Thanks so much for being with us today, Dr. Rajabali.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure.
If you would like to have an in-depth view of domestic violence from an Islamic perspective, then please enroll in our Islamic Perspectives on Domestic Violence course offered through the TYLP website. While you're there, check out the other various free courses offered through TYLP in subjects such as leadership skills, family and community, faith and worship, history, and many more. We hope that you've enjoyed today's broadcast. Thanks for watching. Assalamu alaikum.